In the spirit of reconciliation, Law Squared acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respect to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today.
Hello, and welcome to Beyond Legal, what it really means to be a commercial in-house lawyer. I am your host, Rohan Bilimorio, and today we're going to talk about commerciality, which has become the gold standard for in-house legal teams. But what does this mean in practice? I don't think anyone would like to admit that they're not commercial, but what are the characteristics, skills, behaviors that set apart top in-house legal counsel and teams from others? And how can you lead a team to become more commercial? Today, I'm joined by three very experienced legal leaders, and over the course of the next hour, we're going to try to break down what it takes to run a high-impact commercial legal function, and as an individual, how you can improve your own commercial acumen. Let's get started by getting to know a little bit about our three speakers. First, we have Jennifer Mulheron. Jen is the GC and company secretary of Harrison.ai, an Australian health tech AI company on a mission to transform global healthcare. Harrison develops AI diagnostic assist tools for healthcare providers globally. Prior to joining Harrison, Jen was a senior M&A lawyer at Gilbert & Tobin with a sector focus in technology. She has 15 years of experience as a senior lawyer in AI health tech and across top tier and global law firms. She is very passionate about doing work with purpose and believes the tech sector, in particular AI, has the capacity to fundamentally improve the standard of healthcare experienced by patients around the world. Great to have you, Jen.
Lovely to be here.
Make welcome Pete Hamblin, head of legal at Seek, a website that I think we've all used at some point in our careers and an organization that doesn't really need an introduction. Pete started his career in private practice as a corporate lawyer at Clayton Utz and has since spent over 10 years in a variety of in-house legal, governance, and risk roles. Thank you for joining us, Pete.
Thanks for having me.
Excellent. And then finally, but definitely not least, my teammate at Law Squared, Georgie Gain. Georgie leads our commercial and Law Squared as a service offerings. She and the team specialize in providing practical, business-focused legal support to in-house legal teams, whether on discrete legal tasks or through our monthly fixed cost offering called Law Squared as a Service, or LSAS as the cool kids call it, which is our take on the traditional secondee contracting model. She also does ad hoc work in addition to the LSAS work. She's got a lot on her plate, let's just say that. As a former GC who has spent the majority of her career in-house, she has a first-hand experience of the challenges faced by in-house legal teams and business leaders. It's a pleasure, I have to say it, it's a pleasure to work with Georgie and to have her here today. She's such a champion for the role of in-house lawyers as pivotal strategic business partners and facilitators, as well as providers of legal services. Georgie, great to have you.
I'm blushing. Thank you, Rohan. Pleasure to be here.
Excellent. So now most of our viewers will know the drill by now. We have around an hour for this webcast. So to help us manage time, please drop your comments and questions to our chat moderator, Alicia, in the sidebar to the right. We'll respond with FAQs and resources after the webcast. All right, let's start with the key question. What makes an in-house lawyer commercial? It's more than simply knowing the law, isn't it? Jen, maybe I'll throw to you. What makes an in-house lawyer commercial in your view?
I would say multiple things. It's never one thing. I would actually stack rank and say the legal skills are baseline. There is an expectation that you will have expertise and deep knowledge in the relevant area that you are working in. And so that's not really going to be what moves the needle in terms of commerciality. It's everything else. So your relationship building skills, what are your interpersonal skills like? How empathic are you to your internal stakeholders? Your problem solving skills, because that is the day-to-day bread and butter of what we do. A lot of what comes across my desk are not problems that I've solved before, but I can utilize my problem-solving skills to find a path forward. So I do think that's critical. And what's definitely critical is understanding your relevant company's strategic objectives. What does the company actually want to do for the next 12, 18, 24 months? What's the roadmap? And that should inform what decisions and guidance you give to the business. And then I think finally, your own internal drivers. For me, I think what's quite important is a bias for action. And in particular, the ability to immediately ask, so what, when you look at a problem, as opposed to jumping straight to the legal analysis, and ask the so what question in the context of all of those things that I first listed out, the relationships of the stakeholder, what do they actually care about? What are they trying to solve? What's the company's strategic objectives at that point in time? And I do think all of those things combined will make you a cracking commercial lawyer.
Thanks, Jen. Georgie, Pete, what does this look like at a team level? What are the characteristics and behaviors of a commercial in-house legal team? And how is that different to a non-commercial team? Pete, maybe if you wanted to take that one.
Yeah, sure. I can go first. I'm sure Georgie's got a lot of good views too. The way I think about it for teams, in kind of the mantra that I've adopted, it took me many years. So this is why I was so excited to join this particular webcast, is like there's perfect, which we're kind of all trained as lawyers to be perfect. But then when you go in-house, you realise it's actually more perfect for the situation. And Jen kind of hit the nail on the head. So when I'm thinking about building a team or teaching new in-house lawyers, or even like as I'm learning myself all the time, it's like you've got to just reflect on that principle. If you build around perfect for the situation, sometimes it's doing nothing, like literally getting some instructions and saying, you know what, this is very low risk, you can move on. So for a team, that's kind of, if you have that in mind for all your team members and consistency across your team, I think that's like the foundation piece that I'll probably add to Jen's response.
Yeah, I completely echo what both of you have said. And we see a lot of in-house counsel in the work that Rohan and I do. And just to add to that, I think that understanding of that bigger picture, the appreciation for the situation, but also a real laser focus on where you can add the most value. And the teams that I've seen do that really well are the ones that understand and appreciate where everything's coming from. They have built the relationships with their stakeholders. They know the strategic pathway, as Jen was talking about before. They know the organisation's pain points and they work with them rather than on the business. They work with the business to try and get them to where they need to be. And when it comes to delivery, that laser focus on value means that they're actually creative about what they do with the rest of the stuff that comes into their inbox every day, because not all of it is strategically important. And whether it's engaging someone like a Law Squared to deal with the BAU so they can focus on the things that are more strategically important, or whether it's investing in tech and ops to really make data-driven decisions and to automate some of that lower level stuff that comes through, every commercial legal team that I've seen has that growth mindset, and they never stop trying to improve the way that they service the business.
Thanks, Georgie. In fact, on this point, I was on a webinar last week with a GC from India, and the way he put it was quite nice. He said, we're not, all of us, legal counsel, we're not legal managers or legal counsel or GCs. The term he used is business legal managers. That's what we are. We put the business first, and we're lawyers, of course, but yeah, we have to kind of be commercial lawyers. And anyway, I just thought that was a cool job title as well. So I think that builds a pretty strong picture of both an individual lawyer and team that could be said to be commercial. But what do you see as driving this towards commerciality? Is this a natural evolution for the legal team? And are there standards of performance that teams should be striving for? Georgie, do you have any thoughts on what are the standards, or are there standards of performance that teams should be striving for?
I think that's sort of building on my previous answer, actually. It's working out where you can move the dial the most for the business and making sure that that's where you spend the most of your time. And that can be really hard to do. I mean, a lot of us are often fighting fires. We've got that sort of fire hydrant of work coming at us, and we need to pick and choose every day, multiple times a day, what we spend our time on, and priorities are always shifting. It's about having that agility to understand where you can provide the most commercial value. And as I said, I think having some really good processes and systems in place to help you make those data-driven decisions is going to be really, really key, certainly for legal teams of the future.
I'd say it's not natural though. I don't think it's like a natural skill that, particularly when you come from private practice and you jump into in-house, it's not how you were trained. Like it's just not. In private practice, you have a discrete matter, project, deal, transaction, and you solve that problem. Maybe you're juggling multiple concurrently, but you have a discrete subject area and set of questions. You solve that, and then you move on to the next. And you solve that to the nth degree, covering all bases, and articulating all potential risks. And then if you're a good private practice lawyer, then you'll also give a recommendation of which one you think the business should go, notwithstanding the risks. Whereas it's a very different mindset in-house. And I do think that requires a shift. It certainly took me quite some time to adjust. And I would liken day-to-day, week-to-week for myself and my team as the visual I always have is there's spot fires everywhere. There's a fire. There are fires everywhere. And the business is the house with a fence around it. Where is the relevant fire? If a matter comes onto my desk, where is this fire? Is it a fire on the hill, about to roll down the hill, but probably got another 6 months, 3 months, a couple of weeks? Or is it right at my doorstep and I need to put it out? And you need to get comfortable, I think, with that visual, that I'm going to address one at the expense of addressing others. And it's the ability to quickly prioritize which one is actually going to help the business the most at that point in time. And like Georgie and Pete were saying, add the most value at that point in time. And then be comfortable knowing that everything else is burning.
Can I take us away from burning fires for a sec? Just because the audience will probably be like, it resonates strongly with in-house lawyers. We're often like small teams, under-resourced, and that's why we have Law Squared, to help us out. But, I've started to think about the positive parts of our role, right? And I know hopefully we get to this at some point in the discussion because, like, if you look at the fires and you feel them as fires, you actually never get out of that zone of putting out fires. So what I've tried to view my role and kind of our team's position on things is to go back to like, what's the business trying to achieve? We all agree that's really important. And then actually allocating time for proactive work that nobody asks you to do. So the stuff you build processes so you avoid the fire that might be coming in 6 months, but the business don't know that. So you kind of like allocate time and you see your role as proactive, not just reactive. That's been a huge change in my mindset because it's a pretty tiring job if you're always looking to spot the next fire. Prioritization against reactive is really important and actually like essential. But I think the evolution, at least in the team that I've been in, is to go, hey, we've got to like get out of the weeds and get strategy involved in making sure we can avoid a few more fires in future. That's been a huge thing for our team. We're not there, but like I'd strongly encourage you to dedicate time to that.
I love that. And we set as a company OKRs for the next FY26 strategy and what the company's OKRs are. And then each respective team will then be tasked to set their own OKRs. And my team just went through our own process for the legal function. And that was a really good way for us to articulate certain priorities and projects that are not putting out a fire, but which align with a company OKR and strategy, and therefore gives us legitimacy to put time aside to dedicate to those projects. So that is definitely super, super helpful. But it's tricky it's tricky for, I guess, for a hyperscale kind of company like Harrison. It is kind of firebombs every day. And it is very, very difficult to try and stick to the course of no. We said we would dedicate at least X amount of time per week for XYZ improvements, or even something as simple as creating a new pathway for self-service on this particular thing for the business, which we know will add significant value, but it's very difficult to find time to do it.
Excellent. I wanted to dive a bit deeper into prioritization, Jen, that you mentioned. Like obviously as legal counsel, our clients are not some external party sitting up somewhere else. They're right around us, our marketing, our finance, our ops teams. How do you prioritize? I know it's probably in order of importance of the actual task or fire, but you've always got these different stakeholders wanting everything done at the same time, and they want theirs first. How do you deal with that?
I actually think legal teams are in a really privileged position in the business because they are usually one of the only business units that have line of sight across the entire business. We see every function. We know exactly, well, we should know what each function is trying to do against the overall company objective, which means you have the bird's eye view of what actually is more important from, what at that point in time, what is most valuable. And I think having that context means you can have a very frank discussion with the relevant stakeholder of, hey, I get it, you've asked for this by this time, but this feeds into the broader project at this level, and someone else has asked for something else, which actually does trump yours. So I'll come back to you, but I'll come back to you in 1-2 weeks.
Got it. Excellent. Thanks.
Can I jump in there for a sec?
Please.
This is like the in-house skill that I reckon, prioritization. It sounds so simple. And Jen gave the most eloquent answer there. But, it takes a lot of effort to get to the level that Jen just mentioned. It sounds like, trying to tell somebody that their number one is not the company number one because it's the number one for their team. Oh man, it's very challenging. So I think we say these things, and I've often wondered how do I explain how you get to that point? I think you kind of get to that point through experience. Unfortunately, it does take time to have the confidence to have that discussion. But also, I think the company, this is going back to the business and understanding the business. You've got to understand the priorities and be in touch with what they're actually the company's trying to achieve. Otherwise, you can't prioritize effectively. If you're really good at that part, you have great relationships. You can say, I know that A is more important than B, and that's persuasive, right? But you can't get there just hovering out on the outside and just waiting for people to come to you. You have to go find out that information sometimes.
Yeah. You got to have the broader context, don't you? And I remember actually my first in-house boss, who happened to be your boss too, Pete, I will never forget him saying, probably to both of us, this might not be the most important thing for you. You can see you have that bigger picture, but it's the most important thing in that person's world. So when you do have that discussion with them, it's about, yes, being frank, but also being respectful and not dismissive of, whatever pressure it is that they're under. And if you can't deliver it for them now, tell them when you'll be able to deliver it for them. So at least they've got that certainty that you will work on it. It might just not be in the time frame that they need.
I think Pete's point was really important when he said relationships. And it goes back to one of the first things I said during this webcast, which is relationship building and your interpersonal skills, I think, are really key for in-house lawyers, because without that, it's very difficult to have effective discussions with your stakeholders and for them to trust you and to trust that you actually do have their back. You want to solve their problems. You recognize that their problems are very valuable and important. But at the end of the day, not everything can be done at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
So my equation or mathematical equation in my head always is relationship equals trust plus credibility. So Jen, you mentioned trust, which obviously is, a given, but credibility is something that you have to build with your stakeholders, with your clients, and that's the only way I think we all as in-house lawyers can build those relationships and have those difficult conversations. So no, that's really great. The fact that legal advice needs to be actionable has sort of been coming through strongly in our discussions so far. Let's dive a little bit deeper maybe into how we as in-house lawyers can deliver that kind of advice that supports broader business objectives. And is there ever a risk for compromising legal integrity? Georgie, what are your thoughts on that? Is there ever a risk that we can compromise our own legal integrity?
Yes, in a word. Being commercial doesn't mean being a yes person. And, you got to acknowledge that if you're in a business that's innovative, that wants to disrupt, that wants to win market share, there's going to be an element of pushing the boundaries and trying to do things differently and thinking outside the box. And you've got to be comfortable working in that environment that's healthy, that's normal. If you've got those relationships and that trust and credibility, you can navigate that as an in-house lawyer. But on occasion, the envelope might be pushed a bit far. And that's when that word integrity is really important. And you've got to remember that, what your duty is as a lawyer. And hopefully, if you have built that trust and those relationships, you can have those frank conversations that we've been talking about to say, actually, this isn't going to work. And you'd hope that the business's intention isn't to do anything illegal. They're just wanting to try something different that just isn't going to align with what might be okay from an ethical or legal perspective. And you can have those frank conversations with them and work from there, and your advice will be respected.
Thank you. When I was a private practice lawyer and as an in-house lawyer, one key phrase that used to be used a lot by others, and then I started using it as well, is, you'd go through a contract, you'd go through a document, and you go, okay, these are all the legal points. Oh, sorry, those 5 things that have been highlighted, they're commercial points. So I don't need to worry about them. Dear commercial team, you deal with that. Pete, Jen, obviously we've been talking about how we need to be closer to the business and build those relationships. So how would you advise teams or in-house lawyers who are listening to this to do better between bridging the gap between being just a lawyer, but bridging the gap between the legal team and the business legal teams? How do we sort of bring those two closer together?
It's funny because I saw Pete kind of chuckle at the same time as me when you said, your hypothetical scenario where the lawyer says, oh, these are the legal issues, these are the commercial issues, all yours. I would say if I was chatting to my team, I would flat out say, no, that just is not going to cut it. That certainly cannot be how we operate. I actually think the better output would be the legal points are not on that page at all. We just have the commercial points, and we give guidance on what the commercial points could be with the benefit internally of our legal analysis, because the stakeholder doesn't understand legislation, doesn't understand legal jargon. What they want to be told is, what do I do? Can I do this? If so, how do I do it? What are the steps? And it goes back to what I said earlier of one of the first questions I think a good commercial lawyer should ask themselves is, so what? This is a problem from a legal perspective, but so what for the business? What's the actual risk here? What is the implication? Play it out. And if you know the company's strategic objectives, if you know what the company actually cares about and values, then you can generally craft a couple of alternatives. And sometimes maybe the alternatives are not great commercially, but they are what they are, so list them out. You've got 3 options. Option 1, accept it and roll. Option 2, pick up the phone to the relevant stakeholder and negotiate a path through, but this is the sticking point you need to talk about. And option 3, play hardball and do X, Y, and Z. I think those kinds of advice is couched in that way. It's much more digestible for the business, and they'll start to want to work with you because they'll see you as helping to solve their problems, as opposed to bringing them your problems, which are legal problems.
That was a really good answer. It's hard to add to that. I'll give it a shot at adding one point. I think the real thing you learn early on is how you provided advice in private practice is quite different and often really defective. Because you get in there and, like you say, you kind of leave some things to the business and, like, you've got some value to say. I often say, look, now, this is not a legal point. But have you thought about, like, something like SLAs? It's like, well, legally they're fine. You can agree to whatever you want, but you read them objectively, no legal issue, but you go, doesn't really work very well for the business. So I tend to, what I do is, like, you don't want to tread in their path either, right? Like, it's their role to make commercial decisions. But I like to add value to say, I've done my, like, legal analysis and I hopefully do it a bit like what Jen said. But in terms of, other things that I might spot where it's probably not good commercially for your deal, I'll highlight that and just be like, oh, have you noticed that? Is that kind of what you intended? And then that might start the most valuable discussion out of what I've done, and it's not legal. So that's kind of how I tend to look at my role now.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the work that we do as in-house lawyers is legal, but a lot of it is just common sense. Like, people say to me, they're like, oh, why should I go to law school, or should I go to law school? And I'm like, to be honest, I did 5 years of law school. I don't remember a lot from it. What I do remember, what I did take away was my way of thinking and that kind of problem solving approach that I think all of us lawyers seem to be pretty good at. So I think as in-house lawyers, we can provide that common sense lens, pragmatic lens to things, even though they may be commercial issues. So I think that's a great shout. Just wanted to sort of shift gears and talk about maybe talent and commercial acumen, because I think we all have legal teams, a lot of us. And so, Jen, maybe I'll throw this one to you first. I'd love to discuss how you as a GC are thinking about hiring, developing, and fostering talent to strengthen legal focus. So, Jen, how are you doing this at Harrison? And are there any specific skills you're looking for to ensure that your lawyers adopt a more commercial approach?
Oh, that's a big question. That's actually a big question. I will start by saying I am super fortunate to have a crack team. I do have an awesome team. And I'm genuinely very grateful to be working in the trenches with them. The second thing I'd say is I have not yet found a one-size-fits-all approach. And the needs of the business needs to be guiding my hiring decisions every year because we're a fast-moving company and strategy shifts from year to year, sometimes from quarter to quarter, from month to month. And so what would actually provide the most value from a legal perspective to the business can vary quite dramatically. At one point in time, for example, what the business needed was quite strong IP focus. And then that shifted to much more commercial contracting, SaaS contracting kind of focus. And I think it's been quite attuned and alive to that. And being aware of what the company's strategic objectives are, again, helps you inform what is the best makeup of the team and skill set at that point in time. And obviously, once you hire a team member, you're not going to say, well, next year the strategy's changed, you're gone, I'm hiring somewhere else. That's not what you're going to do. But it does inform what other skill sets does the existing team need to upskill on. What should they look into? What are the conversations that we then need to have? Do we need to restructure the team a certain way to optimize for certain types of work which are growing in volume and value? So I don't think there's a one size fits all. I mean, what I've learned specific to Harrison is because it's so fast moving, because we are aggressively growing, and because a lot of the projects and legal problems that we work on and try and solve are quite novel, and there's no kind of set pathway that has been done before. What I'm primarily looking for, irrespective of expertise area, is a master problem solver and a master synthesizer of information. So how good are you at coming into the business with limited background knowledge and knowing who you should talk to pull in the relevant bits of data and info, and then synthesizing that and providing a view? And how good are you at doing that at pace? And so that's kind of my key criteria. And it just has turned out that I've learned over time that someone, at least with some baseline of transactional experience, even if it's 5 years ago, 6 years ago, at least understanding that pace and being able to execute, like being very execution driven, is very helpful.
Thanks, Jen. I'm going to again shift gears to innovation, because that's obviously a very, very hot topic. And Pete, I'd love your thoughts on this one, especially given what you said earlier about how legal teams can be or should be more proactive and try and solve problems even more before they arise. Now, plenty of organizations see legal as something of a blocker, right? We've all heard that, we're the Department of No, NO. What role do you see for legal to support and enable innovation rather than simply reacting to it? And maybe you can tie that in with, not only innovation, but also the proactiveness that you mentioned. And I'd love to be more proactive, but I don't know really how to do that. And I want to be more innovative, but I don't really know how to do that. So any thoughts?
Sure. It is a challenging question. And not every team, it depends where your team is when we talk about these situations, because sometimes you are in just like, I just need to get through the week. So this is something to keep in mind ongoing for teams. I suppose I can reflect on how I've tried to do it, and we've tried to do it at Seek. And we have used technology to start to try and understand where we spend our time. I know that sounds really basic, but that's kind of like, what do we do today? How's our split of time at the moment? And it's quite simple. You can actually see the data. Data is really an important point. If you don't have the data, it's all a bit on gut as to where your resources are being used. Once you understand where your resources are being allocated, you can determine, is that the right split? Where are we actually and then you can kind of start to see, where can we use things like AI, which is like where I'm sure everybody listening to this is like, how do I use that? You can pick off areas where you think, oh, maybe that could be automated. Do we have to do it that way? And often it's like targeting like a lot of hours spent on it, like administrative tasks. That's a really good thing that our team's done. So things like, you think about an NDA. Does that have to come to a lawyer every time? Could we find a better solution? So once you work out what you're spending your time on, I'd recommend you then think about, ideally, how should we be spending our time? And then you work out, how quickly can we move there? It's not going to be perfect, right? Like sometimes your whole pie of resources disappears, but you can easily just start off even without any software. We don't have anything fancy, to be honest. You can even do a spreadsheet. Ask your team, ask yourself, how have I spent my time in the last 3 months, just roughly? And do percentages. And then you can that's a starting point. You can't really jump to the end position of being like, oh, I'm doing something fancy in innovation, because then it allows you to see where you're at. And also then you look it's a theme that you hear, like, what's the business doing? You can't just go on a frolic and do something that makes no value. There's got to be return on investment. So when you're talking to people, you start with the data to show the return, and that helps you to be the proactive team, right? I think that's kind of how we've looked at it and built it out. There are lots of ways. I'm not sure how Jen might have thought about it, or Georgie, but that's kind of how we've started to do it.
Georgie, do you want to any thoughts on that one?
I love that answer, Pete, because I think a lot of teams, I talked about tech a bit and how helpful it can be, but one of the mistakes that I've seen made is people do just go and grab the next greatest thing off the shelf, but don't spend the time and they don't have the time and energy to invest in making it work for them. And actually, if all you've got is an Excel spreadsheet, you all know how to use that. That's a good starting point. And then you can use the data that you've collated to help justify a further investment in automating things, as you were talking about then. I think that's great. It's a great way of doing it. And, the other point I'd add is when you're trying to get budget for resources and tech, things like that, no CEO or CFO is just going to want to see your to-do list, right? They're not interested in that. They want it in the language that they understand which is numbers and percentages and data and return on investment. So I think that that's a really smart way to approach it and a smart way to optimize your function as you go along.
I love that. And it kind of harks back to when I was talking about Harrison's own strategic objectives and stated OKRs for, the next financial year. And the fact that each business function, including legal, is then required to map out their own OKRs that align and support, that kind of is already your North Star. And if it is the case that automating NDAs, for example, or agreeing that supply agreements of a certain threshold, go to the keeper. Don't want to see it. It's low value. If that is genuinely the case, put it as part of the OKRs, and that aligns and drives business value. And then you've got the green light to go ahead. And that is the data-driven, metrics-driven kind of approach, which I genuinely love. I haven't yet, and I'd love to pick your brain separately on this, Pete, maybe another time, but I haven't yet found a great bit of software yet that helps me give the best bird's eye view of breakdown. And Excel is definitely where I started, and I'm very, very much, I buy into that ethos of simple is better. In many cases, simple is better. But at a point in time when you've got multiple team members kind of doing so many different things, nothing beats a platform that just synthesizes it all and spits out some figures for you. And I haven't quite figured out a platform that does it best yet, I don't think. So I haven't cracked that one. But there was a tidbit that I read, I think it must have been on LinkedIn not too long ago, which came into my head as I was listening to Pete and Geordie speak. And it was quite simple. A legal team, to be effective, can have this mantra: what must I do? What should I do? And what won't I do anymore? And those three things have become, over the past 6 months, kind of my guiding principles for how I develop and talk to my team about our own strategies and our own priorities. What are the things we must do? So we must be supporting the company's strategic priorities. So what are they? What are those should do's, which could be a mix of the first bucket, to an extent, lesser important ones from the first bucket, but also, the legal nice to haves, like shoring up processes, better governance, all of that kind of stuff. But then what is the bucket of, not doing anymore? We're not doing this anymore. And I don't know about your experience, but what I've seen is, because the legal function generally has, a lot of people come to us for common sense and problem solving skills. We tend to then absorb a lot of the burdens cross-functionally, which, if you took a step back, really have nothing to do with us. But because we execute well, we end up doing it. But unfortunately, if you do that for too long, it eats into your resources, and you're then unable to execute on the high priority matters which actually add value to the business. And it's a very easy kind of trap to fall into. And I caught myself doing that not too long ago, which is why this new mantra is like, oh, this is very helpful.
I've literally been pulled into a room before to stop two people arguing. Like, that was why I was there. It wasn't a legal issue. They were just having a fight, and I had to come in and calm them down. And 20 minutes of my life I won't get back.
Parenting skills. You never knew that would be part of the core skill set.
Excellent. So actually, we touched on, OKRs and KPIs and percentages and numbers and being a lawyer and without a maths brain. That kind of freaked me out a little bit. But talking about quantifying commerciality, Pete, maybe you can take this one first. How do you think the success of a commercial legal team should be measured? And secondly, how can individual lawyers, so the lawyers in your team, how can they highlight their contributions in ways that resonate with you as the boss and also with your business leaders?
Yeah, you've got to find a way to measure it. And it is quite challenging to measure it compared to like other departments that have really hard metrics like sales achieved and revenue. And, it's so much easier for them in some ways. So the way I think about it is, well, we're talking about you're dealing with people for a start. So let's start with feedback. That's very easy to obtain. So if you're looking for a commercially minded team that's doing the things that we're talking about, you can easily ask the people they're working with. So that's what I do, and that's part of it. That's a pretty easy pickup for everybody on the webcast here. You can just send an email. You can have a chat, have a coffee. How are you finding it? What are you seeing? Because you can actually hear the behaviours that we're talking about. But that's a little bit time consuming, and it's a bit subjective. So you do have to look for data. I think the data that I am starting to look for is, we talked about the resourcing, the kind of what are we doing now versus what would we like to do. You can remeasure that over time. So what you should be seeing is time spent on the most important things for the business. The OKRs, we have them too at Seek. I think a lot of businesses would have that. So the key things, are we spending the time on the key things? Because if you're not, you're probably getting stuck in the weeds, and that's not where the company is not paying your team sometimes quite a lot of money to focus on things that don't matter. So that's kind of like a really, I think, again, quite simple but effective. Where have you spent your time? I think, like, conversely, it tells you where not to spend your time. So I think just looking at those very simple, like, even if you don't have great software, Jen, like, you can do check-ins with your team quarterly. And we started off kind of like in that fashion because we didn't have software, to just do that. What have we done? We've been so busy, but what did we do? Which is a bit funny when you think about it. And then match it against what should have we done. And hopefully that delta decreases and you can show that to people. And that's pretty effective for things like, your team's perception, your ability to be proactive, and also just like, reaching the ultimate goal of being, more commercial and more helpful, I guess.
Thanks, Pete. Jen, anything to add on that one?
No, nothing to add on that. I think it feels like a perennial struggle to try and close that gap. As commercially minded as you can be as a team, it is very difficult to not be pulled into the weeds at times, because at the end of the day, there is a broader business to run, regardless of strategy, right? And so it's trying to find that right balance. I still find very challenging, and I don't think every team gets it 100% right. And I think it's okay that it fluctuates from week to week, depending on what's going on. I think that's okay. I think provided you have kind of your guiding principles of what you're actually trying to achieve, I think then you'll be fine.
I was going to say that, Georgie and I joined Law Squared on the 4th of March last year. So it's just been over a year. And I remember when we joined, we didn't have a lot of, the dashboards and things. Jen, you mentioned something to pull everything together. You can just get a bird's eye view of what's happening and what, your team is doing, etc. And so then our team, our technical sort of tech wizards at Law Squared, they put together these dashboards for us. And now Georgie's job and my job is a lot easier, but we can see everything on a high level basis, and it's all in beautiful colors and charts. And so I think that's super important. And all this tech stuff, we lawyers, we're trying to grapple with it. We get calls and cold emails from different vendors saying our product is the best, and we've got to sit through lots of demos to figure out how legal ops and all that legal tech works. But maybe, Georgie, if you can tell us, what role can legal ops and tech play in driving more commercial value for the business, and how can it help lawyers make more commercial decisions?
I think that's where tech can really help. It can help. As Pete said, it's data. Getting the data, crunching the data, and distilling it in a way that you can easily digest it, and your stakeholders can as well. And you can see how you move the dial over time. You can make data-driven decisions. That's so crucial. And I think any legal team that doesn't have, whether it's a manual solution on a spreadsheet or something else, that doesn't have a tool like that available to them, is going to be on the back foot pretty quickly. It's really, really important to be able to supplement your decision making with strong metrics. And the second thing is efficiency. So just how you get work, how people instruct you. If you're getting Slack messages and emails and people walking up to your desk and phone calls and Teams chats, that's spreading yourself across all of those channels is an inefficient way to receive work. And if you have a decent operation or process or tech platform that can help streamline that for you, that can relieve a lot of friction for you as well. And as we've all been talking about, there are options to be able to automate some of that delivery too. That's sort of less important, less urgent stuff. And if there is the ability to take some of that off your plate, then that's something that you should absolutely explore, because the more you will get stuck in the weeds, as Jen said, but the more that you can give yourself the headroom to pop your head out of the weeds when you need to, the more effective you'll be.
Thanks, Georgie. So Jen and Pete, actually, so Jen, you mentioned Excel spreadsheets, which obviously I think a lot of us lawyers do use on a regular basis. But how are you using legal ops and tech to enhance your commerciality? And is there an example of where a specific tech or process, example ChatGPT, has led to more efficient and effective commercial outcomes for your team or the broader business? Maybe Pete, you can take that one first.
What a question. Yeah, the answer is yes. So, I think every company, Seek has gone into hyperdrive on AI, and AI adoption is so exciting, so exciting. So, and I think being the company that we are, a pretty progressive tech company, we're probably near the front of that cutting edge. So, we're strongly encouraged, and this is a great thing, and it might be harder for some, but my team is strongly encouraged to innovate and use AI. Obviously, we all know the parameters of that and the risks involved, and also the guardrails you need to put in, but maybe some examples to give people a feeling of how we're starting to use it. So, everybody has their terms of their product or service, and often the lawyer's role is to take instructions on how to update those. So you've got a new product or a change to that product or service, and you get out your markup process and track changes. And, that's very, very important. One of the people in my team, so I'm definitely not claiming this, has created some bespoke prompting through AI to automate that markup process. So we're kind of seeing that as our graduate in our team who, asks the right questions that can be input, and then it actually generates a marked up document for you, which is you think about that, you're like, that is pretty unbelievable. And then you have to review and obviously look at that. But that's an example for our team. I think, lawyers are probably not generally at the cutting edge of technology. We're laggards, I think, generally. I don't think Law Squared by the sound of it is, but I think as a general population we are. But it's so accessible. So, I'd encourage all lawyers to give it a go. Even for basic things, you've always got to check it because it hallucinates a lot. And you've got to know what you're doing, because with the tool, and maybe this, Rohana, goes back to why do you go to law school? Some of those fundamental things you're like, oh, that's not right. You need to know that. You can't just generate an agreement and roll with it. But it's such a, it's kind of, I'm starting to see it in the way of great first drafting, great first analysis, maybe a more powerful way instead of Googling, bring some sources together. So it's just, I'm really excited about all the possibilities. But Jen, I don't know, given your company, I imagine you're pretty advanced in this area too.
Oh, I wouldn't make any assumptions. We're playing around and trialing a couple of different things. I think the GenAI space, particularly tools that are legal specific, are still quite nascent. And so there isn't yet one tool in the market, I don't think, that really will deliver the wow kind of benefit to legal teams. But that doesn't mean there aren't other discrete tools out there that can't add some value. And then it's a matter of triaging your budget. How much budget have you got to spend on tools like this? And thankfully at Harrison, I guess, given we are an AI tech company, we're constantly kind of experimenting with third-party AI software to see what we could leverage as a business, not just legal specific. And so in that sense, it's budget neutral for me to just jump on the bandwagon and say, oh, yes, please, I'll have a couple of trial licenses and let's see how we go. And through that, it's been quite fun to experiment with a couple. I think there are certainly some models out there that provide the 10x, 20x Google experience. and it provides it with footnotes and citations that you can verify very easily. And for a team like mine that often deals with subject matters which are just out of left field, like this niche little area of healthcare regulation in the US, and we wouldn't know where to start, a general model like that can point you in the right direction and at least help you formulate what the initial questions and risks could be. And so I think that's a huge value add. And I'm super interested to see the tools develop further on two fronts. One, on the legal research side. So I think we're starting to see like the likes of co-counsel and stuff kind of enter the market. And I think that's great. I don't think the models are there yet. But I think maybe in a year or two, they'll be much more sophisticated than they are now. And I think that will be a boon for small in-house teams that just can't afford to keep adding to cost base by hiring more people. You just need to be able to expand the existing cost base knowledge set somehow. Right? So I think that use case will be super interesting. And the second one is similar to what you just mentioned, Pete, the contracting side. A model I don't think exists in market yet, which can, in a sophisticated way, translate legal issues into a red line that is of a nature sufficient to have minimal touch from a lawyer before it can go anywhere. I don't think we're anywhere near that yet. And so, but it is exciting to start to see the tools start to come out. And I don't know if I'm even allowed to be dropping names of products. Am I allowed to say them, Rohan? Or will you just edit them out? Because I like platforms like Harvey AI, I think are super interesting, and they're certainly a platform that I'm watching to see, and they're developing so quickly as well. And so I think the tools are there. They just need a little bit more time before they'll really add value. But that means right now is the perfect playground to have your demos and like trial licenses, just to see what you could do. I mean, gosh, I don't have the knowledge, and I don't think my team has the knowledge to be building our own prompts and things like that. But there are certainly toys you can play with in the market, which I do think can add some value. We also recently put in place an AI-enabled contracting management platform to automate, autofill various suites of templates and just help things go a little bit faster and automate approval processes throughout the business for certain types of contracts. And that, I think, has added a lot of efficiency to the business generally, not just to our team. But yeah, I agree. It's super exciting. And my constant challenge is finding the time to set aside to think about what's out there in market and how my team can leverage that. I think that's the trick.
Thank you all. We're pretty much out of time, actually. So time really flies when you're having fun. But before we go, I'll ask each of you the same question. What's one key takeaway you'd like our viewers to walk away with from today's session about commerciality, about KPIs, or any of the things we've mentioned, or something new? One key takeaway. Maybe Georgia, you can kick us off.
It's all about relationships. That's where it begins and ends, I think, in terms of developing your commerciality, establishing it in a new business. Get to understand the people that you're working with, and then the bigger picture will follow.
All right, Pete?
I'd go with my favourite phrase, which I mentioned, which is perfect for the situation, not necessarily perfect.
Excellent. And then Jen, over to you.
Oh, I'm last. I think that makes it tricky. I always harp on about so what. Ask the so what for every problem that you come across. And so what, not from your perspective, but from the business's perspective.
Excellent. Thank you. A huge thank you to all of our guests. It's been a pleasure, and I'm certain it's given many of our viewers some practical strategies for building their own commercial acumen as well as their teams. Thanks to you, our viewers. I've seen a number of questions come through. Some we've answered here, but we'll review them all after this and send you a thorough response in our FAQs in the next couple of days. Finally, if you need help navigating anything, whether it comes to law or tech or Law Squared as a service, just reach out to Georgie or me and we'll be happy to help. That's it from me. Look forward to connecting with you again in our next webcast or at one of our Law Squared in-house counsel events. Thank you and goodbye.